Hello, happy Monday. Welcome to today's HR Huddle. Jen and I are thrilled to be with you guys today. Jen, I think it's been a while since you and I've been together doing this.
I
So,
know it has been.
yeah, so glad to be here with you and glad to be here with you all. And Jen and I were talking about what should our topic be today. And one of the things we've been reading about this past week or 2 weeks, I guess, is some articles and publications are talking about the Great Resignation. And we think it's something that we should be paying attention to. It might not be the most positive or hopeful conversation. We're sorry about that. We'd rather bring a good, fun, uplifting topic, but we think it would be problematic if we don't stop and talk about it, because we think there's some validity to what's being written. And it's based on a professor at Texas A&M was interviewed and talking about the pent up resignation from the pandemic, and that the last 16 months people have been kind of holding still, holding tight, trying to figure out what the world is going to shake out here and what their jobs are going to shake out. And that we're going to see, what he was predicting is that we're going to see unprecedented turnover in the coming months, year, some near-term time frame. And that we as HR professionals and we as firm leaders need to be paying attention to that. And we've been talking about recruiting and experience hire recruiting, and what more can we be doing to find resources and creative capacity planning and non-traditional personnel. We need to focus on our existing personnel, and because there's going to be uncertainty, I think, at a minimum. So that's what we thought we should stop and talk about. And I think maybe a little bit of setup on why this is important, and we have some ideas about what you can do to bring some hope to this conversation. But there are some strategies and some things that you can do to help minimize that impact of this Great Resignation on your firm. So, Jen, what would you want to add to the setup?
Just, it's like the Great Depression. It's like that, a play on that, this Great Resignation idea. And the statistics say, or the prediction is, up to 30% of the US workforce is contemplating changing jobs, and that they haven't affected that yet. There's a contemplation, but it hasn't occurred. So, if your firm has already had some turnover, or even the service providers that you use, your physician's office or your dentist or your favorite restaurant, or, the retail outlet or your supermarket, or whatever your internet service provider. I was trying to think of all the places where this could be just horrifically impactful to us, not just in our work lives, but in our personal lives. If we see this much kind of tumult pop up inside of our different entities. So it's not specific to the accounting profession that this is being discussed. And I think, Tamara, before we get into strategies that you could take to try to minimize the impact of this in your firm, we should talk a little bit about what might be driving it, because it is important sometimes to stop and back up and think about motivation, intention. I don't think people are necessarily, quitting because they're mad or something. I think maybe we had people stick because of the economic uncertainty. So maybe there is a little bit of that pent up you talked about. I also think, though, a lot of this is driven by people being unsure about what it's all about. What's it all about? What's this life all about? The pandemic sat a lot of us on our tail ends. I know it sat you and I on our tail ends, Tamara. We were traveling, and, I was gone from my home 100 days a year, every year, for a long time, decades, and never batted an eye. That was my lifestyle. But the pandemic put me, locked me up at home, no plane tickets whatsoever for 15 months. And it changed my life. I mean, I stopped visiting my house and started living in it. And yes, I will travel again. I'm not going to travel like that again.
Right.
And you aren't either. I know you're not. And so, everybody's had this opportunity to take stock. And as they've taken stock, they may have said, here's the stuff that works for me, and here's the stuff that doesn't. And without a place to express the stuff that doesn't, or a belief that anybody cares, or a belief that anybody will change anything for me, then maybe I'd have to quit. Maybe that's what people are thinking. They're like, I figured out what works for me and what doesn't, and I'm going to have to change my job to fix it. And so that might be one of the motivations. The other is this idea of purpose. For a lot of us, we stopped and said, wow, life is short. It's fragile. Who do I want to be with? What kind of difference do I want to make with those people? And what sort of impact am I supposed to be having? What sort of fun am I supposed to have before this is all over with? And am I getting those things from my current environment? So I think that we're going to see a lot of mobility because no one's asking about that. Nobody's acknowledging those thoughts are on the minds of the workers around us and on each other's minds. We're not discussing it, maybe. And because of that, there's no plans to address it, change anything. So people think, I'll just change scenery. That might change it. And we know that won't change it. We know you can't just, there aren't enough. If everybody wants 100% remote, there aren't enough 100% remote companies to move to, I don't think. You know what I mean? So I think at some point you run out of it. But people are leaving without jobs. So I don't know. It's all very interesting, but I think understanding and thinking about the motivation is important.
Well, and I would add to that low tolerance. I think people have a low tolerance for what doesn't work anymore, whether it's in their personal life or at work or a combination where they intersect. And they're just, there's not a patience to allow that to continue to happen. And so they're willing to take the risk, like you said, not even having a job. And, there are jobs out there to be had. So it feels low risk. Maybe right now, I don't know how long that's going to last, but maybe perhaps that's part of that courage that they have, is that it feels low risk. But I think it's there's a low tolerance. And I think that's what one of the things we have to look at it as firm leaders is if there's low tolerance there, what change? And we've been talking about change for years. And then the pandemic hit and thrust us into change that was non-negotiable. And we have to continue to say, what else do we need to be moving forward? But anyway, that tolerance just struck me when you were talking, that I think is probably a motivator.
Well, and Tamara, I think you and I have been tiptoeing around that lack of tolerance a little bit. In prior HR huddles, we had an HR huddle where we were like, hey, let's think hard about what kind of feedback we're about to give. People can't handle, don't unload both barrels of the shotgun on anybody, please, folks. Let's watch the tone of these roundtables. Let's be careful how much improvement we request or demand of people right this minute. Let's be careful with the feedback. So we felt that lack of an opening and a tolerance for that. Also, we've begged you all and begged you to beg your employers to be super cool about mandating return to the office. We think that's a major, major, major lightning rod for intolerance. We're not saying everybody needs to work remotely forever, but we think that organizations that just drive a stake in the ground, really take a risk. And it's funny that I had an email or a message that came today, Tamara, and I had posted this weekend. I was so excited to see that Deloitte UK said, hey, you don't ever have to come back. And they told their 20,000 or whatever workers, however many it was, 200,000. It was a big number, whatever it was. Sorry, I can't remember.
I think it's 20,000.
Yeah, it was a decent number of workers. They said, you don't have to come back to the office. You'll decide or whatever. And I was so excited about that. I thought that was great. So I posted it out on LinkedIn and I got a message from somebody and he says, the brain trust at the firm where I work, they said that no more working from home effective 9/1. And he referred to his leaders as the brain trust. Euphemistically, of course. That was not a positive reference. And but he was disgusted by that. And I don't know what he wanted from me exactly. We haven't figured that out yet. No, I'm gonna try to coach him on tolerance, but it didn't sound like he was too forgiving the intelligence of that decision. And there are lots of options for these folks in accounting, especially lots of choices. I'm not sure how many choices there are for all workers in all segments that might be thinking about resigning, but I know in accounting, mobility is easy, I would think.
Well, and I think that's a good point because, like, my husband works in the food industry and with warehouse and distribution, and sorry, not doing remote work to unload trucks and manage all the distribution. However, that industry has its own unique challenges and motivators, and what's driving turnover or people to question. And I think that's what's important is to understand what's impacting your firm that could be driving that turnover. Remote work is one of them. I think, leadership transition is another. I think the volume of, client opportunities that we are blessed with is another, and making sure we're working on serving on the right clients. So I think, getting our arms around that and figuring out what are we doing in those areas is super important. And I think as you think about, if it's a Great Resignation, that must mean that they're doing interviews and other people are recruiting them. What are we doing to re-recruit our people in our own firm? And if we could maybe have an initiative, or like we're gonna go on this mission to re-recruit our own team members. And what would that look like? If I was recruiting you, Jen, I would have an interview with you. I would find out what you were looking for. I would find out what your next position must-haves, cannot-haves have. That's one of our favorite, interview questions. We would find out, what kind of, growth opportunities. We would find out, some cultural questions. We would, learn more about, how they like to work. We should be having those interviews with our people and talking to them about it. And then positioning, here's what's so great about working at our firm. Here's what's unique, special, and different about us. Here's what we have to offer. And tailoring it to their desires, their self-interest, their motivators. If we spent the time in the next, 3 to 6 months doing that, that would be very well worth the time to invest. And that's time intensive. I know what I'm saying is time intensive, but gosh, it would be worth it if we could do that, right? It would be time intensive. I know what you're thinking. It'd be time intensive to go have to replace that person and recruit and have all these conversations with a stranger to the firm, an unknown quantity, if you will, if I didn't do it, and then train them up. And then I'm going to spend the time and have people spend the time to train them up. So
and client continuity and realization on jobs and morale, and the cost is quintuple whatever cost it would take for us to do this re-recruiting. And I really think it's, they call them stay interviews, Tamara, but it's the idea of us looking at first our best and brightest. So if you use a 9-box, they're the people in the upper right hand, high potential, high performance folks first. But really everybody. I mean, you better go all the way through, because for people that are keepers. Right. And then having these stay interviews or re-recruiting interviews, I like to have people think of them as having kind of two parts. And one is the part where we find out how you're doing and what's working and not working, so that assessment they already are doing when they're trying to decide, am I going to be part of the Great Resignation? They're already doing an assessment. And so getting them to articulate the findings of that assessment and to trust us with their innermost thoughts about what doesn't work here for them anymore. What is that? If they're good people and they're good-hearted, they're not going to make a laundry list that's impossible for you to fulfill. They're going to tell you the real stuff that doesn't work. And that's the stuff we should be changing. So part of the discussion is, like getting them to tell us their truth. And then the other part is us sort of figuring out now what with them, and do a little re-recruiting by packaging up the job. How about if we do this or that? How about if we shift this or that? And figure out how to get them to accept their job back or to keep their job, right? And it may require, I know a decent number of people who feel like, hey, the market has been rising pretty fast on comp. My firm has not been making comp adjustments. In fact, they held us flat or they reduced our comp last year, but the market is really accelerating. And I know if I took another job, I could get that bump. maybe that's what we're going to have to do. And I know some of you are cringing. I'm cringing too. I don't want to accelerate costs at that rate. And the minute we do, we have to remind everybody that we have to sit down and have a heart to heart with our leaders about increasing fees to clients to help us. We're not a not-for-profit, and if we keep allowing staffing to grow at a cost rate so much higher than rates, we're going to have a real problem. But it is a supply-demand marketplace. Don't forget that. Supply is low, demand is high, so we are, in fact, supposed to raise rates. But anyway, we've got to figure out the right package for these people. And it isn't just comp, though. So I don't want anybody to hear this and think, I know, we'll go out and make a across-the-board adjustment. We've been hearing all kinds of things that people are doing to keep their people, kind of blanket things to try to make it feel better. Because part of it is also this sort of fatigue that we all have from the pandemic, and we have from long busy seasons, and lots of them, and extensions of busy seasons and all of that. And so, some firms are giving the 4th of July week off. I heard another firm just tell me in the last week or so that they are giving Thanksgiving week off, and they're having people use vacation. They're saying, you're taking it off. The entire firm is taking it off. We are going to close down. And you might think that's not actually a gift. Thanks for nothing. You made me take my PTO or whatever. But it is a gift because no one else will be working. And so you could actually take it off. And you don't have to have this huge handoff memo that you give to somebody and pray that they won't have to text you 10 times while you're gone. And so folks are putting out there like no meeting Fridays or no video Fridays. Just trying different things based on this feedback they're getting in these stay interviews to just sort of alleviate some of the challenges people are facing.
Yeah, and I think a big part of it is how do we assimilate this volume that we have, and how do we manage that? And I think another place that firms are looking is really the clients that we're serving, and getting really clear about what clients do we want to serve going forward. And that's one of the questions I would ask in those stay interviews, by the way. Who do you think are your ideal target clients are? Which ones do you think are no longer a fit? And start to identify that, especially as we have, retirements happening and not just transitioning. I was at a leadership, my first business trip in 16 months was last week. And, we were with this great group of, future leaders and newer partners and senior managers. And I've heard this before, but, they've got retiring partners, and it's like, here's 300 individual tax returns. Let me help you fill up your book of business. And it's like, is that the right place to fill up capacity when we're already short on capacity? Or could we think about it differently? If we want to keep that business, could we think about it differently? And getting your people to input to that. They're creative. They have ideas and solutions. And they want to be a team player, but then they're looking at that going, this isn't the kind of practice I want to be developing. This doesn't feel right or part of our strategic plan. When we have a strategic plan, how does this fit? So, figuring that out, I think, will help with capacity. Also the volume challenge that we have.
I can't think of anything that would help a firm more than to be a firm that could tout that they actually right-size their client base. Or segregated work that was too small for their best and brightest and moved it into a pool and had another group do it because it really wasn't the right fit for their higher level technical talent. And they demonstrated that they heard this and they got it and they acted on it. I know some people listen to this, Tamara, and they think, wait a minute, let me get this straight. You want me to cut clients, increase all my costs on the staffing side, and then go to all the rest of the clients and ask for more money? And you think I'm going to stay in business with that model? And we would say, yes, if you do it right, if you do it strategically and with finesse, yes, because you'll add more value to the clients that you charge more to. You'll have time to add some value. You won't be in apology mode. You won't be chasing all your deadlines. You can really be the trusted advisor that all of us long to be. And you can have your people feel like winners instead of losers who are, putting a shovel over their shoulder and having to go just shovel client work all day because it's just so voluminous. It's too difficult to handle. So I really would love to see some of those success stories happen. And we've had one, Tamara, we have a client that we share, and they let go of a bunch of tax clients, and sent them on their way to other firms that would welcome them and be thrilled with them. And boy, did that happen at just the right time, and gave them the opportunity to do the PPP work and the employee retention credit work and all the consultative work that their other larger tax clients really needed. And it turned out to be a boon for their tax consulting business, and just such a brilliant move. I'd love for them to tell their story so that, others will follow suit.
Maybe we need to have them as a guest on this HR huddle.
That's either that or get them to let us write an article about them or something.
Yes,
we'll have to work on that. We'll work on that.
Well, so I want to leave two other things. One is also not tolerating bad behavior. If we have not addressed, bad behavior, and bad behavior, like, we're not following processes and we're inconsistent, but there's still some bad behavior that's happening within the leadership team that we allow, or that we tolerate, or that we're waiting for somebody to retire. That's the no tolerance. People are not going to tolerate that anymore.
Zero tolerance.
And so if that's, and even if it's pockets, we hear like there's a group and that leader, handle it. Like yesterday. Like, I know I'm up on a soapbox in the moment, but please, 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 please handle that. Like, really now, because that's going to kill you. And that's where you're going to see your first mass exodus, because they're like, I don't need to deal with this. I can go find something else. And unfortunately, I'm saying it because we're still seeing it. We're still addressing it. There's pockets of it, and you can probably think about what that is in your firm. And so you need to go address that immediately. And then I think the other thing that I would just say is, this idea of, the feedback from individuals. If you don't have an innovation committee, or you don't have a next gen committee, an advisory board, an employee advisory board, we think you should put one together, and they'll give feedback, and then they can actually prioritize and help drive the change. But you have to empower them. You have to tell the partners that we're going to empower them. You're going to get agreement about what they're going to do. But once you do, we can't, second guess it. We can't meddle. We can't pull back. We can't do any of that. That would be bad behavior, by the way. So we want to make sure that we are executing on that. But then they're driving the change, and they're the ones that feel like, okay, gosh, I can actually make an impact. That's all. I think that's what people want to do right now, is make that impact. So,
Tamara, that's 2 more HR huddles. So one is on forming an EAB and how to do it, and all the options and choices that you face, and how to manage it, and who manages it, and how the agendas get set, and all of that business. And then I think at some point you and I need to do like a bad behavior, behavior modification HR huddle, and talk about bullies and selfishness and arrogance and mother or father knows best. And I'm just trying to block change right and left so that I don't have to change, which is a form of selfishness. Change resistance. Anyway, I think we should probably do an HR huddle on that.
I think that's brilliant. And on that note, we're going to let you guys go today. It was great to be with you. There are articles. Go Google the Great Resignation. There's articles from Forbes and Times and all kinds of places. If you have thoughts about it, we welcome it. And in the meantime, we hope you're enjoying your summer, and we'll see you next week. So thank you very much.
Bye now.
Bye.